So, a public good is defined as a good that demonstrates non-rivalry of consumption and non-excludability. Non-rivalry of consumption indicates that if one person consumes a good, the value of that good is not reduced for others. For example, roads, because driving on a road usually does not reduce its value for others, except in the case of congestion. Non-excludability indicates that you cannot prevent others from enjoying the goods. Once a good is created, it is freely available to all, such as national security. Ultimately, though, it may be most accurate to see goods as possessing degrees of rivalry and excludability, like continuums, and so less of a typology. A good may also be rivalrous but not excludable, termed common pool resources, or it could be excludable but not rivalrous, termed club goods. Common pool resources reflect the tragedy of the commons. There is a human tendency to make selfish private decisions that are harmful to the greater good. For example, to overpopulate and exceed Earth's resources, or to overuse natural resources. There's the allegory of ranchers that overgrazed on public lands and allowed their herds to overconsume the grasses. The individual rancher reaped the entire benefit of grazing, with the long-term costs borne by the entire community. This negative externality leads to overconsumption of the resource. Now let's think about club goods. Public goods with benefits restricted to a specific group are considered club goods, like private parks or cable, perhaps provided by cooperatives or associations. These goods are excludable, but shared by more people than with private goods, but fewer than public goods. Each new member helps reduce the cost of the club goods, so there will be an optimal size of the goods provision that maximizes the benefit for its members. So the focus of the management of club goods is to address the question of determining the size of the club with the most desirable cost and consumption sharing arrangement. Therefore, determining which goods are most desired by the members and increasing the capacity utilization and quality of such goods is essential. In some goods are best produced and enjoyed by an entire nation, some a state, some a county, some a neighborhood, some a household, some the individual. It just depends on the good. Bottom line, goods that we might believe are private goods may actually be more efficiently provided as club goods. And goods that we often consider to be public goods may also be better provided as club goods. This premise is important for the topic of fiscal federalism. Now that we've looked at government provision in a theoretical sense, let's see how government might deliver healthcare, education, and public safety. For healthcare, you might think of three different levels: a national public good about preventing disease outbreaks and creating health knowledge, work that the CDC and NIH do. Next, a large regional club operating a hospital system, say in an expansive metropolitan area, that delivers secondary health care responsible for treating disease. Finally, a small neighborhood club operating a primary care facility whose job is to prevent disease, make diagnoses, and encourage local residents to undertake a healthy lifestyle. Education is similar, with the national public good comprising general pedagogical standards, national testing and research, whereas a large metro area might operate secondary education, with the neighborhood operating an elementary school. Law enforcement can be subdivided into what the FBI does versus big city departments versus community policing. As we'll see in part 3, key innovations could be to separate the neighborhood functions from the metropolitan area functions and to emphasize citizen participation at the neighborhood area. There is an exception, though, to this federalist division of government authority. Many see a difference in what level of government can best produce a good versus what level of government can finance that good. Many believe that taxation should be a more centralized function, even where goods production is best done locally. This is both for efficiency and equity reasons. This divergence is central to a proposal presented in part 2. This is part 2 of the podcast. In the spirit of centralized financing of local government services, presenting performance-based crowdfunding of public education. To understand this local government finance scheme, let's consider income share agreements. This is a financial structure where investors provide a fixed amount of money to a recipient who in exchange agrees to pay back a percentage of their income for a set number of years. The investor, in a sense, takes an equity stake in the student. Possible investors might include for-profit companies, not-for-profits, educational institutions, alumni groups, or governments. Benefits of ISAs are that they are efficient in allocating education resources. They focus those resources on future potential rather than past performance, as it should fund all economically viable plans, and they're less risky for students, passing that risk to whoever underwrites or funds the agreement. ISAs are the ultimate performance-based funding system. However, a possible argument against ISAs is that graduates are indentured to investors. A nearly identical concept is the income contingent loan. The only difference is who gets caught holding the bag in case of a failed investment. For the income contingent loan, it is people who had nothing to do with that higher education transaction in the first place, not stakeholders, rather the unwitting taxpayer. In the case of the ISA, it is actual stakeholders established a priori between the student, college, investor, and future employer. So how is the ISA superior to tuition? Private tuition reflects the legacy problem, a focus on the past. You know how past performance does not guarantee future results? Well, the premise behind tuition is that it does. Legacy provides a college its reputation and hence its attractiveness to potential students, and so high tuition. However, private tuition favors the past for students and their parents as well, as wealthy elites typically attended better funded secondary schools and colleges. Both situations reinforce the privileged access to resources for elites. Financial aid and Pell Grants only mask this problem. They don't transform the structural bias. This system rewards the past more than makes wise investments toward the future. And having taxpayers fund tuition charges doesn't solve this problem, it merely transfers it. But ISAs could give us tuitionless college funding, equalizing access. Moving forward, a college funding system is needed that incentivizes students, universities, and employers to make the wisest investments. Higher education institutions, at least public ones, could underwrite income share agreements with their own graduates. And if they were to, those institutions would themselves become investment opportunities. Those more effectively and efficiently lifting up their graduates economically would provide greater investment opportunities. But who would invest in those ISAs, funding college operations? And the answer is taxpayers, or rather, taxpayer investors. We could create a national retirement system of private claims on public infrastructure, namely human capital. Since the payback takes decades, this plan is best offered in a retirement system. This system might entail automatic withholding within the existing Social Security system by eliminating the withholding cap. Individual workers would direct their payroll withholdings, the original investment, into the public colleges of their choice. Workers financing students. The return then is based on job placement from these institutions, as employers would pay the ISA rate to the educational institutions, providing the return for these taxpayer investors. But this idea could be extended to finance the entire public school system, K through 12, which would equalize family access by eliminating the role of property taxes. The critical issue would be to establish the size of the local area of responsibility, the school district. Consider the term responsibility center. The RC is self-governed, having its own sources of revenue and its own expenses, not a cost center, not a revenue center. As such, it is responsible for and motivated to create more value as well as control expenses. This RC would be geographically larger than a single school district or even a congressional district. You could cluster multiple similar school districts into a single RC, essential for internalizing regional externalities. So when dozens of high schools place graduates to hundreds of local employers with overlapping geographic domains, we want to internalize that into one RC. So these RCs underwrite ISAs for their own high school graduates. Same as a higher education plan, workers direct investments into the RCs of their choice, paid back by the graduate's employers. In fact, this RC plan could run alongside the higher ed plan. Graduates from community colleges typically are placed locally and would fit right in with high schools. Then the bigger universities offering four-year and graduate degrees, drawing students and employers nationally or globally, would be a separate public higher education financing sector. So there would be two separate investment opportunities. One, the regional RCs, which include public schools and community colleges, and two, the national universities. But regarding the regional RCs, there aren't just geographic externalities. Investments in public schools also affect crime and poverty, affecting local welfare and police spending. And a good public library system will also help foster local educated citizenry. So that isn't just the domain of public schools. So the RC isn't just public education, it's all the local public institutions working together, the local government. So besides local employers paying back the terms of the ISAs, you might add performance-based funding for long-term crime and poverty reduction. And part 3 of this podcast, how performance-based crowdfunding fits the TIBO model. Just when you thought this couldn't get any nerdier. The TIBO model says if various local governments offer a variety of goods, local government services, at a variety of prices, local tax rates, then people will move to those jurisdictions that best meet their preferences. Some locales are high tax, high service, others are low tax, low service. This would be hugely beneficial. This model indicates that you will know what residents demand from their local governments because they will reveal it by relocating. Local governments will spend the right amount of money on the right goods. This solves the free rider problem, whereas the private sector, by definition, can't deliver public goods. But in the case of local public goods, they don't have to because local governments can. Potential residents can shop for the best location. So local governments face competition for residents. Government officials will represent their residents' interests because they have to. Citizens will get what they pay for. This competition incentivizes fiscal discipline. Even further, if you see local residents as not just consumers of good local government, but producers as well, citizen participation, value co-creation, then this model is even more profound. The local community that motivates residents to actively participate in the provision of the goods may achieve greater attractiveness to residents. Egoism can lead to seemingly altruistic behavior. Citizens don't just contribute taxes, they contribute participation. So we could separate those two functions, taxes and participation. Now, this model has some key assumptions. Perfect information. You know what all the municipalities offer and how effectively and efficiently they offer it. There is objective data by which to make informed decisions before you actually relocate. No transaction costs. You can relocate at zero cost, both in time and money. No externalities. Decisions in one community do not affect other communities, positively or negatively. Many communities to choose from if these club goods can be provided efficiently by multiple jurisdictions. Communities will achieve an optimal size. There is equal financing of these goods by all local residents. You pay for what you get. Most of these assumptions are not realistic. It's hard to fully internalize human capital. Those benefits are diffused. But the point is, the closer to reality that the assumptions are, the closer to reality that the results are. The tremendous benefits of actually having good local government. This means no local corruption, no free riding within our seas. So thinking about innovation or design thinking in government, maybe the federal government can design a system where the assumptions of the Tiebout model are realistic. And performance-based crowdfunding of public education does just that. First, since relocation presents huge transaction costs, we need the financing of local government to be separate from relocation. Money moves more easily than people. Also, the ISA payback rates themselves, measuring the return on human capital investment, do an excellent job of providing objective data about where to put our retirement dollars. And it could help with long-term relocation decisions. The trustees of the system could track other intermediate performance data. The performance-based funding also helps to internalize human capital, meaning to correctly, fully value it. All investments made, both privately and publicly, within the RC, which truly create economic value, will be measured, and educational investment dollars will chase those opportunities. So jurisdictions would compete according to how efficiently they can translate current input wages into future outcome wages. This emphasizes the productive economy more than the allocative economy, substantially reducing rent-seeking behavior. Regarding the equal funding limitation, linking this to the nationalized Social Security pension, which has some income redistribution, improves upon the status quo. Removing the withholding cap would help fund both this system and the current pension. How much withholding goes into the investment account should vary inversely with income level. Lower incomes pay mostly into private accounts. Higher incomes pay mostly into the nationalized pension. So there's at least more equal funding of local public goods. Even though this performance-based crowdfunding system is national, the difference in cost of living, say, between New York City and rural Pennsylvania do not matter if people don't relocate between RCs. These public services are rather labor intensive, so high cost of living affects the outcome wages and the input wages about the same. Now, there is a problem with relocation from one region to another. A high school in rural Pennsylvania might focus on placing graduates in expensive New York, amplifying rural flight. So, if someone does get a job in New York, then that person's employer should pay New York the ISA rate, and New York should pay that rural RC. Those two payments would not necessarily be a wash. Rather, the New York RC would pay the old rural RC an estimate of its human capital investment, perhaps prior wages if there's a track record, but adjusted by the cost of living. Now let's consider how this idea might integrate efficiency and equity into one single dimension. Here are some problems with the status quo. The wealthy are starting from a place of advantage. The equity problem is that disparities get amplified over time. The efficiency problem is that due to the law of diminishing marginal returns, it probably is not the best economics to be perpetually reinvesting in the rich. Also, income redistribution that does not build long-term value is not economically sustainable. Finally, public administration struggles with whether financing should be based on a fee-for-service model or pay for performance. The former is process-oriented, favors the provider, but may not improve the local resident. The latter is results oriented, may not be fair to the provider, and may discourage investments where they are needed most. The solution is return on investment, productivity, and always adding value. We can offset many wealth advantages by considering intergroup disparities versus intra-group disparities. Regarding the former, because jurisdictions translate current input wages into future outcome wages, for the rich ones starting from a higher base, a higher increase is required for the same return. Underinvested regions potentially become the best investment opportunities. Now, regarding intergroup disparities, in the system, you have equal access to all public education because it isn't funded by tuition or property taxes. The system might also include incentives for long-term poverty reduction. It also focuses on building long-term value rather than short-term income redistribution. Regarding the always add value statement, when neither fee for service nor pay for performance based on final outcome work, you can separate the upstream from the downstream value chain functions of local government services. Specifically, you could design a neighborhood association around an elementary school, a primary healthcare clinic, and community policing. Their job is to start the education process, make the early childhood investments, work on the prevention of poverty, crime, disease, etc., encourage citizen participation and co-creation of value, like neighborhood watch programs or wellness lifestyle. Then the regional RC might organize around a hospital system and secondary education, grades 7 through 12, plus community colleges. Their job is to continue to add value and treat the expensive problems through law enforcement and hospitals with specialized care. Here, the professional class is important. This RC would collectively underwrite their own ISAs. There could be incentives for achieving hospital key performance indicators and long-term poverty and crime reduction as well. But separating upstream from downstream activities, the secondary RC could pay the neighborhood for achieving various success and effort metrics, parents, students, the local community, but pay more for the advantaged students. This does two things. First, it incentivizes the neighborhood to make those early stage investments that may otherwise be neglected. Second, it incentivizes the RC to make investments in disadvantaged students as there is more potential gain. This is the premise behind Always Add Value, and it directs resources toward those RCs that do just that. And these are the references for this podcast. Thank you for tuning in.